Have you ever told a story to a room full of people and watched every single face slowly turn to their phone?
I have. It happened to me in my first week at a new job, and I still think about it sometimes.
Today, we're going to talk about something that changed the way both of us speak English, and honestly, the way we talk in general. It's not about grammar, it's not about big vocabulary, it's about knowing how to tell a story that people actually want to listen to.
And trust me, once you learn this, people will stop checking the time when you talk. They'll start leaning forward instead.
Welcome back to Rose and Jack Everyday English. We're so happy you're here. I hope yesterday's episode helped you feel a little more confident. Today is day 19 of our 30-day B1 to B2 challenge.
This is one of my favorite topics because it's not really about English at all. It's about connection, but we'll show you exactly how to say it in natural English too.
By the end of today's episode, you'll know how to turn a boring story into something people remember, and you'll have new phrases to describe your own experiences with more confidence.
So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it.
Okay, so I have to start with the most embarrassing example I have because it taught me everything. 2 years ago, my cousin got married in Lisbon, and I was asked to give a short speech at the reception. I thought, easy, I'll just tell everyone about the trip we took together as kids. So I stood up and I basically read a list of facts. We went to the beach in 2009. We stayed for 5 days. The weather was nice. I looked up after about 30 seconds, and half the room was checking their phones under the table.
Oh no, that's every speaker's nightmare.
It really was. My aunt was literally scrolling through something, and my little cousin had actually fallen asleep on his dad's shoulder. I remember standing there thinking, why is nobody listening? I have a good story here. I just don't know how to tell it.
So what did you do? Did you just push through it?
I pushed through it, and afterward, I felt terrible. But here's the interesting part. My friend, who works as a teacher, came up to me and said something I'll never forget. She said, Rose, you told us what happened, but you never told us how it felt. You gave us information, not an experience.
That's such a good point. Information and experience are completely different things.
Exactly. And that one sentence changed how I think about speaking English, and honestly, how I think about talking to anyone. So, a few months later, I had another chance at a small work event. And this time, I decided to try something different. Instead of listing facts, I started with a moment of tension. I said, imagine standing at an airport gate, watching the doors close and realizing your flight to your own cousin's wedding just left without you.
Wait, that actually happened to you?
It did. That's the story I should have told at the wedding in the first place. I missed my connecting flight in Lisbon because I was in the wrong terminal, and I had exactly 40 minutes to fix it or miss the entire ceremony.
Okay, now I'm actually interested. What did you do?
So I ran, completely panicking, dragging my suitcase behind me, and I found an airport worker who barely spoke English. I tried to explain in broken Portuguese and desperate hand movements that I needed a different gate. He looked at me, laughed a little, and just pointed and said, "Run, fast, now." So I ran again. My suitcase wheel actually broke halfway there, and I arrived at the gate completely out of breath, my hair a mess, 30 seconds before they closed the doors.
That's an amazing story. Why didn't you tell it like that at the wedding?
That's exactly the lesson. The first time, I gave everyone the summary. The second time, I gave them the moment. I let them feel the panic, the running, the broken suitcase wheel, the strange man pointing and shouting. When I told it that way, people actually laughed out loud, and one coworker said, "Wait, then what happened? Tell me more."
That reaction, wait, then what happened? That's basically the goal of every story, right?
Exactly. If people are asking what happens next, you've already won.
Okay, this reminds me so much of something that happened to me at my current job. In my very first week, during a team meeting, our manager said everyone should share one interesting fact about themselves, just to break the ice. And when it was my turn, I panicked and said something like, I once sat in traffic for 2 hours because of construction on the highway.
Oh, Jack, no.
Yes, I could feel the entire room go quiet. Someone actually said, "Oh, that sounds rough," and then moved on immediately. I remember feeling my face go a little red, thinking, why did I say that? That's not interesting at all. That's just annoying.
What made you choose that story in the first place?
Honestly, it was the first thing that popped into my head. I was nervous, and when people get nervous, they usually reach for the safest, most boring memory, not the most exciting one. But here's what's funny. I actually had a much better story sitting right there. A few months earlier, I had gotten completely locked out of my apartment building at almost midnight, wearing pajamas and slippers, with no phone, no keys, nothing.
Wait, how did that even happen?
So I went downstairs just to check the mailbox, wearing pajamas, and the door locked automatically behind me. I stood there in the hallway at midnight, realizing I had no way back in, no phone to call anyone, and my neighbors were all asleep. I ended up knocking on a stranger's door 2 floors down, and this older man opened it wearing headphones, clearly confused about why a man in pajamas was standing outside his apartment at midnight.
That is such a good story. Why didn't you tell that one at the meeting?
Because in the moment, my brain didn't recognize it as interesting. It felt embarrassing, not interesting. So my nervous brain skipped right past it and grabbed the boring traffic story instead. It wasn't until weeks later when I told the pajama story to a friend and she couldn't stop laughing that I realized, wait, this is the story I should have told.
That's such an important lesson, though, because I think a lot of English learners do the exact same thing. When someone asks, tell me something interesting, their brain panics and picks the safest, most boring answer instead of the strange, funny, real one.
Exactly. And once I understood that, I actually got a second chance. A few weeks later, we had another team lunch, and someone brought up funny nighttime stories. I told the pajama story properly this time, with all the details: the cold hallway, the confused neighbor, the walk of shame back to my own door in slippers, and the whole table was laughing.
See, that's the difference between giving facts and giving an experience, just like we talked about with my airport story.
Right, and I noticed something else too. When I told the story the second time, I didn't just list what happened, I used little details that made people feel like they were there with me. I said things like, the hallway was completely silent except for the sound of my slippers, or his face went from confused to trying not to laugh.
Those small details are exactly what make a story feel real instead of just a summary. When I told my airport story, the detail that got the biggest reaction wasn't even the running. It was the broken suitcase wheel. Something small and specific like that makes people believe it because it's too strange to be made up.
That's such a good point. Specific details make a story believable. If you just say, I ran through the airport panicking, that's fine. But if you say my suitcase wheel snapped off and I had to carry it under my arm while running, suddenly people can actually picture it.
Exactly. And I've noticed something else too. The way you end a story matters just as much as how you start it. If I had just said, and then I made my flight, that's a flat ending. But when I added the detail about arriving with my hair a mess, completely out of breath, 30 seconds before the doors closed, that gave the story a real finish, almost like a movie scene.
It's funny you say that because with my pajama story, the ending is actually my favorite part. After the neighbor let me use his phone to call the building manager, I had to walk back through the lobby in my pajamas at nearly 1 in the morning, past the night security guard, who just looked at me and said, "Rough night?"
I'm sorry, that's too funny. See, that's the perfect ending. It's short, it's a little embarrassing, and it makes people laugh right at the end instead of the story just trailing off.
Exactly. And I think that's something a lot of learners miss when they're practicing English speaking. They focus so much on getting the grammar correct that they forget stories need shape. A beginning that pulls people in, a middle where something goes wrong or it gets difficult, and an ending that feels satisfying or funny.
That's such a good way to put it. I actually started paying attention to this more after I joined a small book club at my local library. Most of the members were much older than me, some in their 70s, and every month we would share a personal memory connected to the book we read.
That sounds intimidating, honestly. Sharing personal stories with people you don't know well?
It really was, especially at first. My English was fine, but I was nervous about holding their attention because these were people who had lived through decades of real experiences, so I felt like my stories were small compared to theirs. The first time I shared something, I rushed through it, spoke too fast, and gave way too many unnecessary details about things that didn't matter, like what day of the week it was.
I think that happens a lot. When we're nervous, we add extra details that don't help the story at all.
Exactly. And one of the older members, a lovely woman named Margaret, said to me gently afterward, "Dear, slow down and tell us the moment that mattered most." That single piece of advice changed how I told stories in English completely. So the next month, instead of rushing, I picked one clear moment when I found an old letter from my grandmother while cleaning out a drawer, and I paused before revealing what the letter said.
A pause like that actually builds suspense, even in a small group setting.
It really does. I remember pausing and saying, and then I opened the letter. And everyone in the room actually leaned forward slightly, waiting. That's when I understood pacing, meaning how fast or slow you speak and where you pause, is just as powerful as the words themselves.
That's such a valuable lesson for anyone learning English speaking because a lot of learners think fluency just means speaking quickly and without stopping. But actually, knowing when to pause is part of speaking naturally too.
Completely agree. And I think that connects to something else I learned, showing your feelings instead of just stating them. Instead of saying, "I was surprised when I found the letter," I said, "My hands actually started shaking a little because I hadn't seen my grandmother's handwriting in years."
That's such a strong example because showing an emotion through a small physical detail, like your hands shaking, is far more powerful than just saying the word surprised.
Exactly. And I noticed the same thing works with humor, too. Instead of saying, "It was embarrassing," you can describe exactly what made it embarrassing, like the neighbor's confused face in your pajama story, and people will laugh naturally because they can picture it themselves.
That's actually something I picked up from watching interviews with stand-up comedians online, since I really enjoyed comedy specials as a way to practice English listening. I noticed that good storytellers almost never explain the joke or the feeling directly. They just describe the scene with enough detail that the audience feels it themselves.
That's such a smart way to practice English speaking, too. Watching how native speakers build a story naturally, then trying to copy that structure with your own experiences.
Definitely. And I think one more thing worth mentioning is that a story doesn't need to be extreme or dramatic to be interesting. My pajama story isn't a huge dramatic event. Nobody was in real danger, but it worked because it was specific, honest, and a little embarrassing in a relatable way.
That's such an important reminder because I think a lot of English learners feel like they need a big, exciting adventure to have a good story, when really everyday English conversation is full of small moments that become interesting once you know how to tell them properly.
Completely agree. It's less about the size of the event and more about how you shape it, the tension, the details, the pacing, and the ending.
So, to summarize everything we've shared today, a good story usually starts by dropping the listener into a moment, not a summary. Then it includes specific, sometimes strange details that make it feel real. It shows feelings through small actions rather than just naming the emotion. It uses pacing, meaning pauses and rhythm, especially before something important. And finally, it ends with a clear moment instead of just fading out.
And honestly, once you start noticing these patterns, you'll hear them everywhere in podcasts and interviews, even in casual English conversation with friends. It becomes a habit, and your English speaking naturally becomes more engaging without you even trying that hard.
I completely agree. And I think that's the real goal of today's episode, showing you that improving your English isn't only about learning new words, it's also about learning how to shape what you already know how to say. Okay, now let's actually show you how this works in real time. Jack, let's do a short practice conversation where we apply everything we just talked about, so you can hear the difference between a flat story and a story that pulls people in.
Perfect. Let's do it. I'll start with something small, something that happened to me just last week. So, Rose, guess what happened to me at the grocery store yesterday?
Oh no, what happened?
So I'm standing in line, right? And I've got my hands completely full. Bread under one arm, a carton of eggs balanced on top of my basket, and my phone stuck between my ear and my shoulder because my mom called at the worst possible moment.
Of course she did.
Exactly. And just as I reached the cashier, she asked me a question, and I turned slightly to answer her, and the entire carton of eggs slides right off the top of my basket.
Oh no, did they break?
Every single one. 12 eggs, completely destroyed right there on the floor in front of a line of at least 6 people. And the worst part is, my mom is still talking in my ear, asking why I got so quiet.
I can just picture the scene. Eggs everywhere, and you just frozen, holding the phone.
Exactly, frozen and mortified. The cashier just looked at me, looked at the eggs, and said, well, at least it wasn't the milk.
That's such a perfect little detail. Honestly, the cashier's comment makes the whole story.
See, that's the trick, right? If I had just said, I dropped some eggs at the store yesterday, that's boring. But when I add the mom on the phone, the balancing act, the cashier's comment, suddenly it becomes a whole scene.
Exactly. And now let me try one, using the same idea. So last weekend, I decided to surprise my sister by cooking dinner for her family, something I almost never do. I found a recipe online for a fancy pasta dish, and I felt very confident walking into the kitchen.
Uh-oh, I feel like I know where this is going.
You have no idea. So everything is going fine. I'm chopping vegetables, I'm feeling like a professional chef, and then I go to drain the pasta. I lift the pot toward the sink, and somehow I completely miss the sink, and boiling hot pasta water goes straight across the kitchen floor.
Oh my goodness, were you okay?
I jumped back just in time, thank goodness, but the noodles were scattered everywhere. Some stuck to the cabinet door, one somehow landed on the dog's back, and my sister walked in at that exact moment to see me standing there, completely frozen, holding an empty pot.
That's such a vivid picture. The noodle on the dog is the detail that makes it unforgettable.
Right? And see how different that feels compared to just saying, I made a mistake cooking dinner. The specific details, the noodle on the dog, my sister's face, the empty pot in my hands, that's what makes people actually want to hear more.
This is such a great example for our listeners because you can literally take any small daily moment, dropping eggs, spilling pasta water, missing a flight, and turn it into a story people remember just by adding these real details and pacing it properly.
Exactly. So the challenge for you at home is simple. Think of one small, slightly embarrassing thing that happened to you this week and try telling it out loud using these same tricks. A clear moment, specific details, and a strong ending. Okay, now let's slow down and look closely at some of the expressions we use today, because these are things you can use in your own everyday English conversation right away.
Let's start with out of breath. This means you're breathing very hard and fast, usually after running or physical effort. Rose used it when she arrived at the gate. A simple example, after climbing 5 flights of stairs, I was completely out of breath. A common mistake learners make is saying, I was out of air, which isn't correct. The natural phrase is always out of breath.
Good one. Next, let's talk about walk of shame. This is a funny, informal expression for walking somewhere while feeling embarrassed about something that just happened. Jack used it about walking through the lobby in his pajamas. For example, after spilling coffee on my shirt right before a meeting, I did the walk of shame to the bathroom to clean up.
That's such a useful phrase for everyday English conversation. Next, let's look at mortified, which means extremely embarrassed, even stronger than just embarrassed. I used it after dropping the eggs. Example, she was mortified when she realized she had been talking with food stuck in her teeth the whole meeting.
Great word. Let's also review freeze up or froze, meaning your body suddenly stops moving because of shock or surprise. I use this when I drop the pasta water. Example, when the interviewer asked a tough question, he completely froze up and couldn't remember what to say. Learners sometimes confuse this with get cold, but freezing up is about shock, not temperature.
Good distinction. Next is pull someone in or pull people in, meaning to capture someone's attention or interest strongly. We use this phrase to describe good storytelling. Example, the first sentence of a good story should pull the listener in immediately.
Let's also review trail off, which we use to describe a story that ends weakly, without energy. It means to become quieter or less clear gradually, especially at the end of speaking. Example, his explanation slowly trailed off and everyone in the room went silent, unsure what to say next.
Great one. Next, picture it, or picture the scene, meaning to imagine something clearly in your mind, almost like watching it happen. Rose used it several times today. Example, picture the scene. It's midnight and you're standing outside in the rain with no umbrella.
And finally, let's look at relatable, meaning something other people can easily connect with because it feels similar to their own experience. We use this to describe good storytelling. Example, her story about forgetting her keys was so relatable. Almost everyone in the room had done the exact same thing.
These are all such useful expressions for improving your English fluency and making your story sound more natural and engaging.
Now, let's talk about some common mistakes B1 learners make when telling stories in English.
The first mistake is giving too much unnecessary information at the start. Incorrect. On Tuesday at around 3 in the afternoon, after I finished lunch, which was rice and chicken, I went outside. Correct. I was walking outside one afternoon when something strange happened. The lesson here is start close to the interesting moment, not with every small detail leading up to it.
Another common mistake is using only simple past tense with no variety, which makes stories feel flat. Incorrect, I saw a dog, it ran, I laughed. Correct, I was walking down the street when I suddenly saw a dog running straight toward me and I couldn't stop laughing. Mixing past continuous with simple past adds natural rhythm to your storytelling.
A third common mistake is stating emotions directly instead of showing them. Incorrect, I was very scared. Correct, my hands were shaking and I couldn't say a single word. Showing emotion through action feels far more natural and native-like.
And finally, many learners end stories too quickly without a clear closing moment. Incorrect, and then it was fine. That's basically it. Correct, and after all that chaos, we just looked at each other and started laughing so hard we couldn't stop. A strong, clear ending makes your story memorable instead of forgettable.
All right, here's your challenge for today. Think of one small, slightly embarrassing or funny moment from your own life, as simple as spilling something, getting lost, or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Now, try writing it as a short story in English in the comments below, using at least one specific detail, like Jack's broken eggs or my noodle on the dog, and try to give it a clear, satisfying ending instead of just stopping suddenly.
This is such great practice for English speaking and English fluency because the more you practice shaping real experiences into stories, the more naturally your English will come out in real conversations.
We really want to read your stories, so don't be shy, share them below, and we'll be reading through the comments after this episode goes live.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And honestly, thank you for showing up again for day 19 of this challenge. Your consistency is exactly what's going to make your English so much stronger over these 30 days.
We hope you leave this episode not just with new vocabulary, but with a completely new way of thinking about your own stories, because everyone has interesting experiences. It's just about learning how to tell them.
Don't miss tomorrow's episode, day 20 of our 30-day B1 to B2 challenge, because we've got another topic coming that's going to help your everyday English conversation skills even more.
If you're enjoying this English podcast and finding it helpful for your English speaking practice, please subscribe so you don't fall behind on the challenge and share it with a friend who's also learning English.
Thank you again, friends, for listening today. We hope you learned something valuable, and we genuinely can't wait to talk to you again tomorrow. See you soon, friends.